Good morning and welcome to Boston, You're My Home, Getting to Yes on Housing. Thank you all for coming this morning. I'm Renee Loth. I'm editor of this fine publication, ArchitectureBoston Magazine. It is the quarterly ideas publication of the Boston Society of Architects. Every issue has a theme, and the theme of the current issue is housing. It's chock full of ideas, creative ideas from architects, designers, and policy folks to increase the supply of housing, lower the cost while still maintaining design excellence. And I hope that by the end of this morning, we'll all be a little bit more optimistic about our ability to achieve our housing goals in the city, because I don't think we'll be getting very much help from the federal government. We do have a terrific panel today to help get us there. An architect, a developer, a member of the building trades, and a public policy leader, sort of the full circle of the housing picture. My role here this morning is just to introduce the panelists, who will each make a presentation of about 10 minutes each, I hope. And then I'll come back and facilitate a general conversation among all of us panelists. And then I'll come back and we'll have questions and answers from the audience. We are honored today by the presence of the Mayor of Boston, Martin Walsh, who has agreed to stay with us for about an hour. So I will make a special plea to our panelists to keep your remarks succinct so that we might be able to include the mayor in the general panel discussion. I think he'll be slipping out right before the Q&A. So I'm going to get right into the introductions and we'll get started. Thank you so much. Tamara Roy is the current president of the Boston Society of Architects and principal at Stantec. Her portfolio includes luxury, mixed market, and affordable housing, and also the Yotel, which is the new micro hotel on Seaport Boulevard. She is the chief proponent of the housing typology, formerly known as the micro unit, is now called the urban housing unit, or UHU. And she has received her master's degree in urban design and architecture from, I think it's Berlage Institute, which is an international think tank in Amsterdam. This is useful to know because she lived there in 300 square feet with her husband and baby, so she walks her walk. Kimberly Sherman-Stamler is president of Related Beal, where she's responsible for overall management of the firm. She has 17 years of real estate experience, but most notably for this panel discussion this morning, she was central to the conceptualizing and financing of Parcel 1B over by Haymarket, over by the North Station, which is the largest affordable workforce housing development in Boston in the last 25 years. And it just had its topping off ceremony last week. In addition, she sits on the boards of the Rose Kennedy Greenway Conservancy and Habitat for Humanity of Greater Boston. Mark Ehrlich is the Executive Secretary-Treasurer of New England Regional Council of Carpenters, a 19,000-member organization, about 9,000 of whom are here today. He's a member of Carpenters Local 40. He has been since 1975. He's worked as an apprentice, a journeyman, foreman, and superintendent. Special thanks to the Carpenters for organizing this morning. He's also on a member of the Boston Zoning Board of Appeals. I think that's still accurate. And Mass Inc., the public policy think tank, and he's the author of 2 books on labor issues published by Temple University Press. Martin J. Walsh, he is the 54th mayor of the city of Boston. He's going to offer opening remarks for us. A former 8-term state representative from Dorchester. He's also former head of the Boston Building and Construction Trades Council, which represents skilled workers in 16 different trades, from the iron workers to the pipe fitters. As Boston's mayor, he has set an ambitious agenda of both planning and housing, with the goal of creating 53,000 new units of housing by 2030, the city's 400th birthday. Let us all welcome Mayor Walsh.
Thank you very much, Renee, and thank you for that nice introduction. I want to thank also the Boston Society of Architects and the entire building community represented that's here today. We need everyone's help at the table if we're going to continue the progress and take it to the next level. Today's panel is a great example of that, and I want to thank them all. I want to thank Tamara, Kimberly, and Mark, and Kim and Mark for their great work. These are leaders of organizations that have stepped up with the types of collaboration that it takes to get workforce housing built in our city. I also want to thank, today we have a few people from the city here. I'm not going to name everyone, but I want to just shout out a couple people. One is Chief of the Environment, Austin Blackman, is with us today. Thank you, Austin, for being with us today. Because as we build, we have to look towards the environment as well. So I want to thank Austin and his team. We also have Buddy Christopher, the Commissioner of Inspectional Services, with us today, who's in charge of all the building permits and making sure that we sign off on all the buildings. So I want to thank you, Commissioner Christopher, for being here with us today as well. And we have representatives from the Department of Neighborhood Development, from the Boston BPDA, from the Housing Innovation Lab, from different areas, so I want to thank you all. What was central to our 2014 housing plan was not just an ambitious target, but to foster new ideas and new partnerships that we needed to reach the goals and adapt to the changing conditions. I am pleased to give you an update on some of our results. We set a plan to create 53,000 units of new housing in the city of Boston by the year 2030. The reason we did that is because of the growing population, and it seems to be this move into the city of Boston by millennials, but also by baby boomers coming into our city. And we were finding that, and we knew that, and many of you in this room knew that people were being priced out of the city of Boston and couldn't afford to live here, couldn't afford to buy here, couldn't afford to come here. To date, we have nearly 19,000 units that have gone into construction, including 5,323 middle-income units, 3,653 low-income units. Nearly 12,000 of those units are completed, including 3,500 middle-income housing, 2,300 middle-low-income housing, and 13,000 more units approved in the pipeline. That is roughly 40,000 units of the plan is either built, under construction, or in the pipeline. That's a total of $18 billion of new investment. It puts us on a 75% goal, way towards our goal, and we're well ahead of the schedule. One of the most positive signs has been the spread of this growth beyond the downtown Boston area into our different neighborhoods. We worked to catalyze this early on with our neighborhood home initiative. We've got hundreds of vacant lots into production for moderate and low-income buildings. We're now seeing major investments in large developments take shape in several neighborhoods. Our progress has already produced one of the most vital outcomes that we wanted to have. We're seeing rents that have stabilized in the city of Boston for pre-existing housing stock in areas where growth has been high. That means the production of market rate units is meeting the demands, and more of our existing stock will stay within the middle income area for people. And that's a big deal. And we're also watching to make sure that the increase of housing isn't slowing down our economy. We're keeping an eye on that as well, watching to see that we're not overproducing on the market, something that's really important to some of the developers in this room, that we continue the great trend that we have in the city of Boston. We now have a chance to build on a lot of our progress. Boston voters approved the Community Preservation Act 74 to 26%, which is a good thing. With full community support, we're going to be able to invest in low and moderate income housing while also protecting our open spaces and historic preservation. And it's a great combination. I think everyone knows what the CPA is, but in case you don't, the CPA is a fund that's a 1% assessment tax on real estate property in the city of Boston. The average homeowner will pay roughly between $18 and $28 additional a year. That money will be put into a fund. In the first year, we'll be able to collect about $16 million of money. We're going to get a state match. It's not dollar for dollar right now, so we'll get about a 25% state match for the first year, but we're going to work with the state to try and get that up to 100% funded, so we get dollar for dollar. At least 10% of the community preservation money in the city has to be spent on open space, historic preservation, or housing. And then the rest of the money gets split up with a board that's going to be created between myself and the city council that will have representatives on that board. So this is going to ensure that for a long time in the future, there'll be at least 16 million, and that number will go up obviously as time goes on, in a fund to be able to go into affordable housing, go into open space and parks. And if you look at Boston, I'm excited about the housing aspect of it, but right now today I'm a little more excited about the historic aspect of it, because we're approaching our 400th birthday as a city. We have many historical sites in our city of Boston that are in desperate need of repair. This will give us the opportunity to be able to fund some of those repairs. And open space as well, we've made the largest investments in parks history over the last 2 budgets, so we're going to continue to do that, so I'm pretty excited about that. Another essential factor in moving forward is our revamp of the Boston Planning and Development Agency. A modern and transparent BPDA can do 2 things that are sometimes thought to be odd. It can make the approval process more efficient and predictable. It can also foster a community process that secures broader input, makes projects better, and achieves genuine buy-in from our neighborhoods. And again, when you think about what the Boston Redevelopment Authority had meant for our city for nearly 60 years, it was created to move our city forward, created to really build an economy in our city, build a downtown district, and really look at business side of it. And what's happened, and for the future, what we have to do is not only develop, but we have to plan for that development. So it's important for us to look differently at that agency, to really think about how does a building that used to be built and approved through the system, how do we take that building and turn that into a planning opportunity? And that's really what we're looking at with the BPDA, is looking at planning and development and how do we grow as a city. It's a win-win for our city because we've launched Imagine Boston 2030, the first citywide plan, whose first draft is going to come out this week, looking at Boston and what we're going to be, what type of city we'll be in the year 2030. We're moving forward on strategic planning areas for growth zones in South Boston and Jamaica Plain, Roxbury. These plans are not spiking density in already built-up neighborhood. They're extending neighborhoods into areas that need more life, and we're working on how do we get more predictability for developers to be able to come into an area and able to cut back on some of the money they're spending on designing a project, but actually have some of that understanding in the forefront so we can put more money into the project. We're also going to be, we're also looking at climate change. And certainly, Renee mentioned the federal government with a lot of support. I have no idea what's going to happen in the federal government, and I don't think anyone in this room does. Certainly 84% of Boston, Massachusetts people have no idea what's going to happen. But given that, we are still committed to the growth that's sustainable and climate ready here in the city of Boston. We know that solving the workforce housing challenge takes more resources and it takes creativity. That's why we formed the Housing Innovation Lab right in my office. Marcy and Susan are here. It's exploring ways to lower costs. That includes compact units. We toured a model around the city and showed over 2,000 residents. We're looking at, does that model work for our city? And it's important for us to make sure we get feedback from all of the stakeholders to see how that works. It also includes density bonuses that we are piloting in South Boston and Jamaica Plain areas. We're looking at new ways of how to support community land trusts and maintain affordable pricing. We're looking at studying accessory dwelling units as a way to create affordable rents. It's important to note that the innovation is more than a design challenge. It's in neighborhood context and community consensus as well. So we have to get the buy-in from the different stakeholders. Finally, the regional question. Boston economy is a regional economy. Our housing market is a regional market. We have towns in Greater Boston where the market would produce workforce housing if zoning allowed it. We have some work to do on our own zoning as well. But ultimately, we need to get regional solutions. That means working through the legislative process, working directly with cities and towns, and working with regional planning groups and housing advocates to make sure that we look at the entire region. One way or another, it's going to happen. If you look at Boston's population, officially our population is 650,000 people. When you unofficially, I'd say it's about 673,000 people. We haven't seen that type of growth in our city in nearly 3 decades. There's an opportunity here. But when you take Boston as a city of nearly 700,000 people and you put us in the region, now we become a region, a greater Boston region of nearly 2.1 million people. And that changes the way that we deliver services. That changes the way that we look at economic development. That changes the way that we look at housing. That changes the way we look at education. That changes the way we look at a whole host of different issues that we're dealing with in the city of Boston. And I know that many cities in this region are concerned about preserving their character, and we are in Boston as well. The one thing we learned again last week is the world brings challenges whether we like it or not. Sometimes in order to preserve your deepest values, we have to adapt. If markets are reducing your economic diversity and reducing your ability to support your family and local businesses, then we certainly know the town's character and the city's character will change. So protecting property value is not the same as protecting character. It's worth remembering that Boston's North End is known as learned all over the world for its character. But it was built to house low-income immigrant families who had nowhere else to go. That's a good reminder of our true wealth and our true character of the people and of all of our people. If we really want to preserve our city's values, we have to build with all their needs in mind. I want to thank you for being here today for this important discussion. I look forward to having the conversation, and I'm going to sit down now before Renee pulls me. Thank you.
So you know what? I might recommend that the panelists sit in the front here so that you can actually see the presentations on the screen, because I realize that you can't really see them from where you're sitting, and then you'll just come up one at a time. How's that? Because I want everybody to be able to see all the presentations because they're so great. I have seen them already. So I'm going to now turn it over to Tamara, Roy, and then I'll come back up. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Renee. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to ABX, a conference of my organization, the BSA. So I'm going to start here. I hope this is going to work. Yes. Okay. So I found this on social media. I don't usually try to be political, but I thought that it was apropos for our discussion. So I think I want to just talk, again, it's only really 10 minutes, but I'm showing a video at the end, so it's really only 7 minutes, about some of the facts of our Boston housing supply, and then what can we do about it. So one of the things that we found is that 2/3 of our households in Boston are either 1 or 2 person households. And yet the housing stock there, the supply, is actually the reverse. It's 2/3 is 2, 3, 4 bedroom units and above, rather than studios and 1 bedrooms. So what we tried to do is show through these cute animations what that means. What does a shortage in small units mean? So you have seniors, actually our largest growing population in Boston, who need to downsize and would like to move to places with elevators, for example. They can't move because they can't find that housing, and so they can't get families into their housing. Then we have our students and our young workforce, millennials, who I heard yesterday, more millennials live with their parents than live with spouses. Believe that? They would like to live alone, but they need to pair up or group up. They can pay much more in rent than a family, and so they price out the family also. And then you have the baby boomers swarming into the city for all this great stuff that our city has to offer. They can pay 2, 3, 4 times the rent, and those folks of limited incomes, college debt, get priced out. So it's really partly our housing stock that's making this happen to families. And then again, baby boomers, what happens is since they can't move, they're stuck too with their kids and their grandparents. So what we find in architecture and development is that just the size alone makes family units too expensive to build today, and that, you know, at normal rates, $4 rental and $300 for construction cost, that 3-bedroom unit is really expensive and has to rent for a ridiculous amount of money if it's new construction. So that's why we start looking at smaller units for affordability. And we also know that over 25% of our folks are paying more than half of their income on rent, which is outrageous. So I took a quick look, and I think the mayor really already sort of went through these stats on how we're doing. And as he said, we had the goal of 53,000 units, which is 17% additional to what we already have. And we're already a third of that after 2 years, which is incredible. But before we start congratulating ourselves, 2% of that is at the very low income spectrum. 8% of that is below 60% AMI. And then 21% is between 60 and 120, which I thought, that's really great. We're actually doing pretty well in that area. But I thought I'd go on the BPDA website and just see, what does that mean, right? And everybody asks, what does 20% mean? And if you look at the higher ranges of these, which even I can't see from this angle, for the single person, that's a person making $82,000 a year. And they're supposed to be able to afford an apartment at $1,650 a month. And you can see as you go through the family, also those numbers. And so I think one question does become like, let's not make sure that we're excited about something that actually most of our population would not see as workforce or middle income. So I think the conclusion really for all of us is we're all trying our best, but that the status quo is struggling, that we're doing so much luxury and so little modest. In my car analogy, I'd love to have the Prius on the right, but instead, and we'd love to have those numbers reversed, where 18% was luxury. That would match more of our city, and 82% was modest. But how could we possibly get there? So we're just trying to keep eyes on the prize, and the mayor has been doing amazing stuff in this area. Pilots, modular, partnerships, land swaps, trying as hard as we can to get those numbers up. And trying to prioritize. I think the next step is really just being maybe just totally extreme about it and just saying affordability is so important that, we want to do density bonuses for anything that is up above 20% affordable. Can we lower the unit rates for affordable projects? So we just push on, when you're doing, trying to get more affordable housing in the city. And this one, crazy idea, could we earmark those extra property taxes that we're getting for luxury units, and rather than just spreading them through the city's budget, actually say, let's take from those folks and put it toward the folks that need it. So what can we do? We are doing at the BSA this partnership with the Housing Innovation Lab and D&D to do a pilot where we're doing compact living for middle-income renters. We really want to build this project, not just talk about it, so that's exciting. We did a charrette in the neighborhoods where we taped out a 900 square foot 3-bedroom unit, which is lower than the zoning would say is the minimum size, and people actually said it could be smaller. We also have a one-room mansion exhibit, which is at the BSA now. I encourage all of you to go. It takes all the feedback from the YooHoo, and it mocks up one bedroom. So we've heard again, innovative housing is affordable, that it's a small unit with common spaces. So going outside of the unit, what are those common spaces? We've mocked up an entire micro-unit building at the BSA, and you can walk through it. It has common spaces, laundry, workspace, etc. But what it really does, which is very interesting, is push these sizes really small and lets people experience them. And like the 615 square foot 2-bed, you can walk around there and say, there is no problem, I could live in this. And that is 400 square feet lower than what our city minimum is. Then lastly, the YooHoo, which I'm going to show the video about, prefabricated, 384 square feet, traveling around the neighborhoods. We also did a design, if people came in and said, this is not for me because I have a family, we did a design on the right where you put 2 YooHoos together, and it's a 770 square foot 3-bed, which many people responded very favorably to. And again, on the left, what we're trying to show folks is that this is not about style. Any modular development can fit into your neighborhood, it just depends on what it's clad with. And so this has been the feedback, 1 to 2%. People, the 2,000 some odd people that toured it, said no. The rest said somewhere in the range of maybe a yes. So I'm going to show the video now. And thank you very much.
The YooHoo is a prototype 385 square foot apartment built in partnership with the Mayor's Housing Innovation Lab, the Boston Society of Architects, and Live Light. Its purpose is to gather community feedback about compact living in Boston neighborhoods. The YooHoo design is based on years of research on small unit living. It has a space for every function: a large entrance foyer, a bed alcove that can be hidden with curtains for more privacy, a wide hallway flanked by a storage closet and a code-compliant bathroom, and a living room with a full kitchen and dining area. And what makes the YooHoo extra special is its many other features that make it seem so much bigger than it is. Let's take a tour. At the entry, the YooHoo is designed so you can see right through to the large windows in the front. There are hooks for coats, shelves for extra storage, and a place for a bench or other furniture so you can personalize. The bedroom alcove is large enough for a queen-size bed with space to walk around it and a bedside table. Above is a large storage area for whatever you have that needs to be hidden from view. The wide hallway has lots of storage, an extra wide double-door closet big enough for a stackable washer-dryer and a clothing organizer, and storage above for items you use less often. The bathroom has a wide sink area and a large mirror cabinet, with space for baskets or a storage cabinet below, a towel rack, and a walk-in shower, easier for seniors, and it feels like a nice hotel. Back in the hall, there's a bookshelf for office supplies, cookbooks, pantry items, whatever you like. And then, the main living area is the wow space. 2 pull-out sofas make room for guests and provide plenty of seating. The dining table can easily transform from a desk to seating for up to 6 people for a dinner party. And with one entire wall of glass and doors that open to a balcony, the room feels large and bright. Most people are afraid that compact living means mini fridges and living like a student. Not here. The kitchen has a 2-burner stove. Who's used more than 2 burners? Lots of cabinets and shelving, a large sink, a full-size refrigerator and a pantry, as well as a microwave convection oven. Now here's what some of YooHoo's visitors had to say.
How do I explain it? I don't know. It's small, but it's like spacious at the same time. Like, it's tiny, but there's more than enough space. Like, you usually don't find that very often.
You know, I would love to see this happen, you know. And I've never seen anything like this. This is the first time, you know, something like this coming into Mattapan. So it would definitely be a great project to definitely see, you know, moving forward, you know.
The fact that I'm still a student and, you know, a lot of people that I know are still living at home with their parents and stuff, and they're looking to get out on their own. This would be a great way to start out.
You know, I could have company and I could have, you know, people come in, but they're not going to stay over. It's just for me, you know. I love it. I love the idea, really. I love it.
Good morning. I'm Kim Sherman-Stamler, president of Related Beal. Thanks for having me today. I'm thrilled to be talking about our project and our developments in conjunction with the mayor and Mark and Tamara. I'm really excited about Parcel 1B, and our company has been excited about this project for a long time. But truthfully, our company is built on affordable housing, and we're always looking to get into workforce affordable and various types of housing in the cities that we build in. And although I'm going to talk about 1B and how complex and complicated it was able to get done in a short period of time because of everybody together that was working on this project. So I'll flip through the slides. My presentation is kind of short, but I'll probably talk a lot through it. But one of the notable factors is, as we sit up here and we talk today about how you build affordable housing and how you build workforce housing, and it's a dilemma for cities throughout the country, the one defining factor that I found in working on Parcel 1B is the great desire to have workforce and affordable housing in the city of Boston and in the state of Massachusetts. It's something that people talk about all the time, but in my experience and our experience actually doing 1B, our coming to the table with various city, state, and local federal agencies to get the project done, I think was a defining factor in this project. You'll see that sorry. Oh. Oh, there we go. Oh, no, that's okay. I know it. And so I will talk about that throughout the presentation. But you know, when people talk about the challenges of can it be done, the answer is yes, it can be done. And I think that our project is one of the more complex projects for various reasons. But I think that if everybody didn't get into the room wanting and willing to get this project off the ground, it wouldn't have gotten done. I don't think it was just us, sort of as developers. So. Just to identify the site, it's located in the Bullfinch Triangle in Boston, in downtown Boston. It is one of the parcels that was born out of the Big Dig, and our particular parcel was a land assemblage of MassDOT land on a long-term lease and a private sliver of land that we ultimately combined and made one parcel. We are also, as a company, building building residences on Lovejoy Wharf, and we built Converse's headquarters right across the street. So in that neighborhood, we're building about 1 million square feet, call it, and we wanted to identify a site that we could build workforce and affordable housing in Boston, and this was sort of a great site for us to do it on. This project, Parcel 1B, was originally contemplated in 2007 as an office building with either 2 office buildings and a hotel component or hotel and residential. And it went through different iterations throughout 2007, really to 2016, based on the market at the time, the developer at the time. And ultimately, at the end of 2015, we as a company came in to buy what was a planned and programmed and sort of approved project, but we did not want to do the same program as the original developer. We wanted to do 100% workforce housing with the hotel component. So just for some project stats, it's about 500,000 square feet. The current program is a 220 key hotel, 239 workforce and affordable units, 10,000 feet of retail, and 220 parking spaces. We're building over 93, and we had constraints in terms of going below, because going below is the highway. So we go 5 feet below, and then everything else is above grade. So when we change, this is actually the original program in 2007. Over time, it iterated through various different programs, and then we ultimately came to ours. Because of the because of the location itself over 93, we had some particular challenges. In addition to the complexity of building, because it was a MassDOT parcel with the private assemblage in an area that had both city and state jurisdiction, we also have federal jurisdiction because it's over 93, has to sign off on everything. So when I was saying earlier that everybody had to come together, it was a little bit of a domino effect while concurrently working to get this project done in terms of permitting, approvals, redoing the interior units to get more affordable units in, which I'll talk about in a minute. And the biggest sort of smoking gun was we had to get it all done within a year. So in 2015, by the end of 2015, our financing would go away, our long-term lease with the state would go away, and a lot of the benefits and the financing that we needed had to get done in the end of 2015. So everyone in this room is very familiar with building and what does it take to get a project re-permitted essentially, refinanced and redesigned in 12 months when you are literally putting a shovel in the ground 12 months later. So the other big thing was because we were buying a project that was both residential and hotel, it was great that it had a residential component, but we had to make tweaks to the residential component of the project to include 3-bedroom units, and that was something that we wanted to do. So the original plan was studios 1s and 2s. We wanted to add 3, and of the 239 units, we have 24 3-bedroom units to accommodate families in downtown. So just to talk a little bit about and that's the one of our drawings that I think almost everyone in our office has on their bulletin boards, just to remind everybody else in the office of the project that they're working on that's the ground, you know, two major directions of the highway. So just to talk a little bit before I get to this slide and some of the benefits of the workforce housing location, I just want to talk briefly about the things that made this project happen. So I think that a lot of people feel that it's impossible because of land cost or construction cost or time periods for permitting or different jurisdictional requirements. But one thing with Parcel 1B, and I'll talk through a little bit of the financing and the programming in a minute, is every single bit counted. So this project is 4 components: hotel, parking, retail, residential. But within the residential, it's actually 2 components: workforce and affordable. And within the parking, it had to be split for just different sort of financing reasons. So this project is actually 7 different components that benefited from a 121A structure from Boston, but then also is a long-term ground lease with the with the Commonwealth. So because of the long-term ground lease, because of the 121A, and because of the components, it's actually a 28 entity sort of cake of 3 tiers of 7 entities. And the only reason that I bring that up is because, again, it's very complex, but it was able to get done. So the benefits that we got and the benefits that we were seeking, where this project could not have been done without, is the 121A gave us a little bit of breathing room on the real estate taxes for certain components, the affordable and workforce component of the project. we received a state tax credit, and that was a critical component of the project. I just want to note that the state tax credit currently is going through 2020 with the allocation that I think is $20 million that could possibly reset. And that was a critical component to our project, and that was an important piece of getting this to work because, again, every dollar counted. So anything from $1 million to $10 million made this project work, and anything without and not having that extra dollars to infuse into the project was sort of make or break. We had affordable housing trust fund money, and we were very appreciative of that. Our company was building sites across the street that we had committed to voluntary contributions of affordable housing before we even got involved in 1B. Our 131 Beverly project and our Converse headquarters project, we made voluntary contributions that ultimately got used for personal 1B, but we hadn't planned on that at the time. There was another developer building in this city that needed production units that we put onto our site, so we were able to do that. And then we also financed the project with a portion of tax-exempt bonds that also allowed us to get a federal housing tax credit. The financing sources, and we had a conventional loan in the hotel, and our company put in a bunch of equity, including with a partner for the hotel. If I put it on an org chart, I started to do an org chart, it's blinding, and I started to do a list, and that's equally as blinding. But the reason that I bring that up again is because every contribution counts, and so I really sort of applaud the mayor on the CRA, and I applaud everybody's interest in that because those are meaningful dollars that really go into projects and make them work, and the dollars are so critical that it's make or break, and when you get that funding and you are able to push a project forward, you can do very complex projects like ours. The other thing, too, for our project was we really thought that this location was a terrific one for affordable and workforce housing where you're right in the heart of downtown Boston. So that means access to work via public transit. It means you can walk. It means that you've got the public schools right there, and it means that your commuting time is less. And in our particular neighborhood, we have a supermarket, and we have all the neighborhood conveniences right there for people to live, work, and play. This is the ground floor. The bottom is Beverly Street, and so you'll see that the hotel component is along Causeway Street, and the residences are further back on Beverly with a parking entrance bifurcating the two. And just to go over some of the programs, we didn't change the program, and we did not change the amenities. We actually added a few. You'll note our dog spot and bullet too, but we have we have party rooms and a fitness center and amenities and parking and everything else that you would want. We have children's rooms for families that are coming in, and with growing families that are going to use spaces. And like Tamara was saying, it's very important to take advantage of space outside of your own home, and we were able to create those spaces. So this is, and I'm bummed because we had our topping out, and I did not include a picture from the topping out, so we'll have to come back next year. But the views from the balcony, and again, we're 14 stories above the Greenway, above the Central Artery Tunnel, so we're facing south and north, so we've got tremendous views. This is an image of our party room. Our health club, our party room has a terrace that overlooks the Greenway. And it's a sort of a highly amenitized building with 239 units, so you're going to have over 500 people coming in and out every day. And just to finish, we're really excited about this project. We're really proud of this project. But like I started with, I think the one defining factor was the city and the state want to see this done. And to be able to get into a room with 25 city, state, and public agencies and roll up your sleeves in 12 months to get this done, I'm not so sure how much that can be replicated in other areas, but I certainly know that it can be replicated here, and we're looking forward to doing more. So thank you.
Good morning. My name is Mark Ehrlich. I'm the head of the New England Carpenters, and very honored to be part of this panel and with the mayor. This is an exciting period of time in the history of the city of Boston, and there's a really ambitious effort across a whole lot of lines to try to do something about housing crisis to deal with the population growth that the mayor referred to, so that Boston can continue to be the international cosmopolitan city that it is. My presentation is going to be a little bit different than I think what has typically been discussed as part of how to deal with the housing crisis. I'm actually going to talk about the workforce that builds the housing, about the production of housing and what the issues are there. And I'm going to try to deal with some what I would call myths and realities. The information that is in my presentation is based on a series of reports that have come out over the last couple of years. I'm sure some of them you're all familiar with, other ones you may not be. They refer both to Boston and New York City, and the reason I'm including New York is because New York has some of the same challenges. It's a growing city. They're trying to build more housing. But the other reason, quite candidly, is because since the recession, much of the residential industry and much of the housing that is being built in New York is being built on a non-union basis, and there are people in the development community who are arguing that that should serve as a model for what happens in Boston. So I'm going to start with, I don't know if Tim Logan is here, but last year Tim did an article about the Northeastern report card on housing. And it talked about the drivers that were going in the industry that were increasing costs. And what was interesting was I had read the report and I'd read Tim's article. Tim's a terrific reporter. And there was a lot of discussion about the price of land driving costs, and there was nothing about the price of labor. But the headline said, land labor prices reduce prospects for affordable residents, a study finds. So I called Tim up and I said, how did that happen? And so he threw the headline editor under the bus. And that's fine. But the real point is, why did that happen? And it happened because it had become the conventional wisdom, because there was a series of forums and op-eds in the business journals that said that what was really driving costs was that union labor cost too much in the city of Boston. So what I'm going to do is actually talk about what these studies actually say, as opposed to what a headline editor might have interpreted. And the reality is it's very similar in both Boston and New York City. Construction, the hard costs, labor, materials, overhead profits for the contractors, subcontractors, et cetera, is 59% of the total development costs. The soft costs, the list is there, design, financing, et cetera, about 22%, and land is at about 18%. But what is really interesting is when you look at these studies and they talk about what are the factors that are increasing costs and making it difficult to build non-luxury housing in the city of Boston, whether it's workforce, market rate, affordable. The luxury housing, the rents are so outrageous that you could pay anybody anything and it wouldn't matter. But for the bulk of the housing that we're talking about here today, what's interesting is over the last decade, the cost of land has gone up 4.4 times faster than the rate of inflation. Land remediation and infrastructure has gone up 5 times faster than the rate of inflation, and financing costs have gone up 5.4 times faster than inflation. And labor and materials, which make up the bulk of the hard costs, have actually only increased 0.3% as fast as the rate of inflation. So when you compare them, sort of summary over this last decade, land costs have gone up an aggregate of 42%, and construction costs have only gone up 6%. So this really runs counter to kind of what has been the perception and the argument of a few people in the development community who have suggested that it's labor costs that are the real problem. The other side of that is what happens when you don't use people who get decent wages and benefits. And the residential industry around the country has become the Wild West of the construction industry. I'm talking about the private residential industry. In New York, it's largely mid-rise and high-rise because of the nature density. In Boston, once you get outside of the downtown core, into the neighborhoods, into the other cities and towns surrounding Boston, it's the typical design, as you all know, is wood frame, 5 stories or 4 stories over podium. That's the multi-unit design of choice that we see in today's world, unless you're building a Yoo-hoo, of course. What is interesting is a study that the Fiscal Institute did in New York that looked at the residential market and estimated that 36% of construction workers in the residential industry are employed illegally. Now, what does that mean? That means either they're paid off the books completely, paid cash, and treated as kind of invisible workers in the economic scheme, or they're misclassified as independent contractors when they in fact are functioning as employees. Now, why do contractors do this? It's very simple. In a highly competitive market where materials cost roughly the same for everybody, if you're trying to save costs on labor and you pay people cash or as independent contractors, you save roughly 25 to 30% on labor costs. You're not paying the mandated state and federal taxes, you're not paying workers' compensation insurance in a highly dangerous industry, and the incentive to do that is obvious when people are looking at the bottom line and the dollars are hard to find. Interestingly, this study pointed out that in the affordable housing industry in New York, the percentage of construction workers working illegally actually rose to 2/3. That's a lot of people. And this is a national problem. If you go south of the Mason-Dixon line, this way of operating is unfortunately the rule rather than the exception. What does that mean? It's tax and insurance fraud. People are getting out of their obligations to pay taxes, to provide insurance for their workers. It is what is known as wage theft, pure and simple. And the workers who are working in those conditions are increasingly immigrant workers and increasingly undocumented immigrant workers who, because of their uncertain legal status, are not in a position to complain or try to change the. This is Beth Healy. Some of you may have seen, did a months-long investigative piece that was on the front page of the Globe 2 months ago about immigrant workers in the current construction boom filling the gap, and this is largely in the multi-unit wood frame residential industry, the very projects that we are talking about. That is where this is occurring. The article talked about that these are workers. If you haven't read the article, I would encourage you to go back and look at it. It's very thoughtful, a lot of horror stories in it about individuals, human interests, but also generally the nature of what it is to work. And what she pointed out in the article was that for many of these companies, the reality is that it's so pervasive and it's so off the books that it's very difficult for state and federal authorities to really crack down and solve the problem. And so it is basically a bet that these contractors, subcontractors make, that the chances of getting caught are minimal, the fines are not that substantial, and so from a simply economic point of view, it's smart business to operate this way because you can save a lot of money. What are the consequences for the individual workers who are in this situation? Again, I'm referring to New York because there's been more work done on this, but the dynamics are very much the same. Last year, there was a front page story in the Times about safety in construction and what's going on, and this is these numbers are scary. Building activity increased by 11%, but construction accidents were up nearly 5 times that amount, 52%. And it is because of the growth of the underground economy in the construction environment. And again, a majority of these deaths and injuries involved undocumented immigrants. So to kind of look overall at these cost factors, I just want to point out a couple of things, which is on the union side, that union wage contractual increases throughout the trades over the last decade, the increases have really been relatively modest, considering we have a boom. They've been in the 1% to 3% range. And that, I would like to remind people, is not just for wages, but wages and benefits. It's for total compensation. So the 3% increase is really, again, considering the boom that we have, I would characterize as modest. The carpenters have had, even with all of this, we recognize that the residential market is a different market than the commercial institutional market. And for 20 years, we have had a rate for wood framing for these projects that I'm talking about that is 62% of the commercial institutional rate on most projects in the city and the region. That has allowed us to be on virtually all of the wood frame multi-unit residential jobs in the city of Boston and many of them in the surrounding communities. Many of the other trades are either considering actions like this or adopting similar programs or trying to figure out other ways of subsidizing costs. But one of the studies, and this one again for New York, and drawing on New York simply because there have been a certain amount of more academic research done there. This is by a former BRA economist, John Avald, who says that with construction worker wages comprising 17% of construction industry billings in the city, construction costs representing about 60% of total development costs, it means that construction workers' wages are estimated as 10% of the total cost. What does this mean? This means that when people try to save money and to make the argument that, workforce housing, market rate housing, affordable housing should be done on the backs of the people who are actually building it, A, that's not right, either morally or ethically, and B, it actually is not justifiable in terms of the economics. We have made a choice that this session is called Getting to Yes, or that's sort of one of the themes, and so by having the residential rate, we believe that that's our contribution. We think that everybody, all the players who are involved in the industry, if we're really going to tackle the workforce housing crisis, need to sort of step up and make similar kinds of agreements. And the city has been an absolute model of leadership around this under this mayor, about really trying to understand what it's going to take to accomplish the incredible goal of 53,000 units. The final thing I would say, and I'll close with this, is we're talking about workforce housing. Well, who's going to live in it? When you talk to the people who are marketing that housing, you're talking about teachers, firefighters, nurses, construction workers. That's the demographics that these units are aimed at. So isn't it a little bit ironic to think that you would build these projects with construction workers who can't afford to live in them because they're being paid cash and minimal wages with no benefits? So I would argue that when we think about the myths and realities, that the workforce that is actually building these units has to be considered as one of the key components of a successful public policy program. We're really excited that this city is one, especially in today's environment in the last week, that this city is one of the cities that has this progressive vision of building housing, and that it is a strong union city, and we're very much part of the solution, and we are grateful for that. Thank you very much.